with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, and the left fights the right, and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was, in fact, a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Alex Phillips. And for the next 2 hours, we'll be getting stuck into the burning issues of the day. Nothing is off the table and no one will be cancelled for saying what they think. Keeping me company today is former national newspaper editor Dawn Neeson, and here's what we've got coming up on the show. Number 10's bid to bring in a British Bill of Rights. Just days after the Rwanda asylum flight farce, the government sets out a plan to allow UK judges to override European courts. Plus, cost of living misery as inflation hits a new record high with the price of pretty much everything going up. Can anything be done to tackle the escalating economic crisis? And a warning that President Putin is ready to use his Satan II ballistic nuclear missile capable of hitting Britain in a matter of minutes. That's what we're talking about for the next hour. What do you want to talk about? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet the programme @gbnews. First, though, it's time for GB News headlines with Rosie.
Good afternoon to you. It's just 2 minutes past 2. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Wiltshire police are investigating the death of a soldier who was killed during a training exercise on Salisbury Plain. The 26-year-old man sustained head injuries after he was involved in a collision with a warrior armoured vehicle yesterday morning. He's been identified as a member of the 5th Battalion, the Rifles. In eastern Afghanistan, the number of people killed during an earthquake now stands at 1,000. A local official says a further 1,500 people have also been injured. The 6.1 magnitude quake struck early this morning, reducing homes to rubble. Rescue operations are underway, but it's feared the death toll will continue to rise as emergency services reach remote villages. A national incident has been declared after polio was detected in sewage samples in London. The virus, which was officially eradicated in the UK in 2003, was discovered at the treatment works, which serves 4 million people in the north and the east of the capital. The UK Health Security Agency is urging members of the public to ensure their vaccines are up to date. Whilst the risk of contamination is low, people are being warned as the virus can cause paralysis and, in rare cases, can cause death. The Labour leader has gone head-to-head with the Prime Minister as voters prepare for the two polls for 2 crucial by-elections. Sir Keir Starmer accused Boris Johnson of failing to prevent this week's national rail strikes by refusing to meet with unions and operators. As the country deals with the biggest walkout by train staff in 3 decades, the Labour leader said the Prime Minister's only interested in blaming everyone else.
The Prime Minister of this country and his Transport Secretary haven't attended a single meeting, held a conversation or lifted a finger to stop these strikes. So rather than blame everyone else, why doesn't he do his job, get round the table and get the trains running?
Boris Johnson responded by saying the Labour leader is in the pocket of the unions.
Strikes, as he knows, it is up to the railway companies to negotiate, and that is their job. We know why he takes the line he does. We know why he won't condemn the strikes. We know why even now he hasn't got the gumption to call out his MPs who are going out to support the pickets, Mr. Speaker. The reason his authority is on the line in this matter is that they take £10 million from the unions, Mr. Speaker.
Inflation has hit its highest level in 40 years, climbing to 9.1% in May, up from 9% in April. The rising cost of food and non-alcoholic goods were the main driver, further squeezing household budgets. Last week, the Bank of England warned inflation was likely to peak at more than 11% in October. The Chancellor says the government's doing everything it can to reduce the figure.
I want people to be reassured that we have all the tools we need and the determination to reduce inflation and bring it back down. Firstly, the Bank of England will act forcefully to combat inflation. Secondly, the government will be responsible with borrowing and debt so we don't make the situation worse and drive up people's mortgage rates any more than they're going to go up. And lastly, we're improving the productivity of our economy, improving the supplies of energy we have and moving people off welfare into work.
The Deputy Prime Minister has outlined new legislation which gives the UK power to override rulings by the European Court of Human Rights. It's after the court blocked the first deportation flight carrying asylum seekers to Rwanda last week. Dominic Raab told MPs the UK's new Bill of Rights will place ultimate legal power in the hands of the UK Supreme Court.
Mr. Speaker, next we will strengthen the separation of powers in this country, affirming the supremacy of the Supreme Court, being explicit that the UK courts are under no obligation to follow the Strasbourg case law and indeed are free to diverge from it. I'm proud of our world-beating judiciary. And what else is the point? What else is the point of a Supreme Court if it bows in subordination to a European one?
Glastonbury has officially opened after a 3-year hiatus because of the pandemic. Traffic is building up around the site in Somerset as thousands of festival goers opt to drive rather than take the train. The event's celebrating its 50th anniversary with acts including Ukraine's Eurovision Song Contest winners Kalish Orchestra. On Saturday, Sir Paul McCartney will become the oldest ever solo artist to headline the festival at 80 years of age. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to Alex for We Need to Talk About.
Yet more Tory window dressing to woo the anti-woke, or vital changes to our legal system. A British Bill of Rights talked about for years now is finally being proposed by Justice Secretary Dominic Raab. The idea is that Britain takes back control of its criminal justice system and stops unelected judges in Strasbourg overruling British courts. But some are worried this would amount to scrapping human rights, setting a dangerous precedent to the rest of the world and breaching international law. Its supporters say our rights can go much further, protecting free speech, stopping European privacy laws and putting victims first rather than protecting criminals and terrorists, making it easier to deport them. And then there are the legal eagles, picking apart every promise and pledge and calling the lot of them little more than pointless, hollow grandstanding. Well, Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab, who introduced the Bill of Rights to Parliament today, told GB News that the reforms will restore common sense to the system.
What this bill will do is it will replace the Human Rights Act, reinforce our quintessentially British liberties like freedom of speech, the liberty that guards the others, give it higher pecking order in the hierarchy of rights, greater weight attached to it. I think that's important. But also curb some of the abuses of human rights that we've seen with very elastic interpretations fueled by the Human Rights Act, which, just to give you an illustration, have allowed foreign criminals to trump deportation orders with very opaque, elastic interpretations of things like the right to family life. And that's the kind of common sense approach that will restore to our justice system.
Well, who better to talk to than UK immigration lawyer Harjap Singh Bangal. Harjap, great to have you on the programme again. Now,
hi, Alex.
When you heard this announcement, it's been in the pipeline, some might argue, for quite a while. Theresa May was pretty keen on bringing a British Bill of Rights in as Home Secretary. Do you think this is just going to make your life more complicated?
I think it might make a lot of people's lives a lot more complicated because, in effect, it's saying the government can now pretty much do what it wants and no one can police it, in effect. It's going to replace the Human Rights Act, which gives everyone a lot of rights, which has been responsible for a lot of good work. But until we read the actual main part of the bill, until that's published, we can't really say as to what it's going to do. Hopefully it will replace the Human Rights Act and it will make us compatible with the ECHR, give us every right that we have at the moment, in which case it's a like-for-like sort of replacement, and it doesn't do much more. We'll have to wait to see if it goes further or goes a lot less than what that is.
I mean, essentially, if this just replaces what we've already got, it means that it'll be British courts stopping deportation of migrants rather than foreign courts.
Yeah, I mean, just to clear this up, the European courts are being blamed for stopping the flight to Rwanda. Actually, by the time the injunction was granted, I think there was only about 4 or 3 people left on the flight. The rest, the Home Office had conceded due to challenges in British courts. So initially 100 people were on that flight to go back. By the time it even got to the European court, there's only about 3 people left on the flight who that decision referred to. The Home Office had in fact been successfully challenged in relation to the other 95 odd and had withdrawn their notices. So the British courts had also, ruled that was illegal.
Now, you are the sort of person, as a day job, as an immigration lawyer, who would use things like the European Convention, the Human Rights Act, to prevent people from being deported. And perhaps you can understand why a huge chunk of the public is pretty frustrated by that. But why what sort of defences do you use and why? Why do these people need lawyers like you to prevent them being deported when the truth is a lot of them will have come into the country illegally?
Well, let's give an example. No one's saying that anyone who's committed murder or rape or anything akin to that shouldn't be deported. They should. But however, you have to treat everyone fairly. That's the key. And you have to look at it in the whole. So let me give you an example of what we had to deal with last year. We have a person who's married to a British citizen, has got 2 British kids, and he did a driving offence. Didn't hurt anyone, didn't kill anyone, didn't even injure anyone. Got jailed for 13 months. The government tried to deport him despite him being here for X amount of years, having 2 kids. The man had spent Christmas inside without his kids. And then we used the right to the family life to prevent him being deported. Now, the rule is if you get more than a 12-month sentencing, you're issued with a deportation order. However, the right of appeal everyone gets, and he's got a right to challenge that using his Human Rights Act. Is it right for someone who's been convicted of a driving offence, has 2 kids, British kids, and a British wife, to be deported to a country perhaps he's never been to for 20-odd years, and to be treated the same as someone who's been done for rape or for murder in exactly the same way? That doesn't make sense. So that's what sometimes we have to do. We have to argue the case and let a judge decide fairly whether that is. The ultimate decision is not in the hand of lawyers, nor in the hands of people who are appealing. It's in the hand of judges, and judges use UK law to decide that.
Well, let's bring it back to, the big news story of the moment, which is the government policy of trying to deport people who have come here illegally on boats across the Channel, a lot of them, to Rwanda for processing there, and essentially being unable to do that because a lot of these people have legal protections to stop that from happening. I mean, who are these people? Why are they getting these legal protections? It's a very different situation, one might say, to someone who's lived in the country for 20 years, to someone who arrived yesterday. I mean, why should these people be protected? Who are they? How desperate are these people?
Well, the fact is, first of all, they're seeking refuge. So this act of seeking refuge in itself is not illegal. However, why they're getting injunctions remember, they're not being told, right, you'll never be sent to Rwanda. what is actually happening is there's a hearing in July next month as to whether the whole Rwanda scheme is legal or not. So the injunctions that were sought, well, hold on, why are we trying to send people to Rwanda before it's even been decided whether the scheme is legal or not? So what would happen is if they were sent to Rwanda and next month in the hearing it was decided actually the scheme's illegal, we would have to bring them all back again, because what then we would have effectively done was deprive them of their rights. So what these people have said is wait to this hearing till July, and this is what the judges have said, the UK judges and the European judges. Well, wait till your hearing in July. You know, your law isn't actually been okayed yet and been given the green light. And then if you want to introduce the Rwanda scheme, if it's decided it's legal, then by all means you can. So it's almost like it's while a case is pending, the government were trying to arrange flights. The government could have avoided this by just scheduling the flights in late July or August. But for some reason, and a lot of people have said because of the local elections coming up and they needed to whip up some support, that they tried to do it in June, knowing well the government knew, and because lawyers, just like me, they advise the government when all of this is introduced as well. And a lot of lawyers work for both sides. So what happens is they would have said, look, you're not going to get away with this. Your flight is not going to take off because you've still got a case pending. But the government still decided to push through it and then decided to blame the lawyers and the courts and the judges by saying, well, hold on, look, these lot are stopping us doing our plan. We did what we said we were going to do. When in fact, it's not the case. It's the fact was what the government, the judges have decided what the government's trying to do at this stage is illegal and pending a hearing in July.
Harjap, thanks so much for clearing some of those things up for us. Harjap Singh Bangal there, who's a UK immigration lawyer and a truth speaker on this matter. Joining me now is Matthew Goodwin, Professor of Politics at the University of Kent. Matthew, we've heard of the British Bill of Rights before. It's been rumbling through various Conservative Party manifestos. But is this a bit like the Rwanda scheme, more sort of window dressing and whipping up a bit of PR in favour of the government who really don't know what to do about the migrant crisis?
Well, it's great to be with you again, Alex. No, I don't think it's window dressing at all. I think if we go back to that vote for Brexit in 2016, what was that ultimately all about? It was driven by a very strong desire in the country to reclaim powers from the European Union back to UK institutions. And that also involved the reform of immigration, which has happened. The issue on the South Coast is slightly different, but it's also included a reform of judicial arrangements and being less reliant on the judgments of the courts in Strasbourg. And I think then that's why actually this is a significant moment in British politics. For many voters, they'll be looking at these policies and measures and seeing that promise from the Brexit referendum being acted upon.
Now, Brexit itself, of course, was notoriously held at the prorogation of Parliament and so on and so forth in British courts. It was the British legal system largely used to try and prevent that successful leave vote ever being enacted. Do you think the British public will have more truck with British judges stopping flights to Rwanda than European judges stopping flights to Rwanda?
Well, I think it all comes down to the decision, right? Voters are going to be unhappy with any decision from a judge if that decision challenges their existing beliefs. But I think what has really annoyed voters in the UK over the last few weeks in particular is once again a reminder that despite Brexit, despite the turmoil and the political carnage of the last few years, even now on this really important issue of immigration, and Alex, this is still a top 3 issue for most Conservatives in the country and a top 5 issue for lots of voters more generally, the idea of European judges again intervening in this policy area is a difficult one for UK voters, particularly Leavers, to accept. And that's why I think the government has really jumped on this opportunity to try and reinforce its position.
Jumped on an opportunity, but are you confident that this British Bill of Rights is going to be introduced, that it's going to make its way through Parliament, that it's going to come into force and do what it says on the tin?
Well, let's see. I think if the proposed legislation passes the initial obstacles and is brought before the House, and Dominic Raab and others draw on the experts who are available to ensure that it is drafted appropriately, then there's certainly the numbers in the House to get something like this through. Boris Johnson still has the largest Conservative majority since 1987, and lots of Conservative MPs, Alex, we tend to forget this, but lots of Conservative MPs, especially the ones that I speak to, are saying, look, we need to have something to go back to our voters at the next election, which is really only 12, 18 months away, that we've got to sell this. We need to say, here's the Brexit dividend. Here's something that's changed. OK, we've left the EU. We've got a new immigration policy, but here's some action on the Channel crossings. Here's some action on European courts. Here's a serious levelling up strategy that is rebalancing the country. That's what they're looking for, right? And that's where this becomes highly significant.
Matthew, thanks so much for coming back on the programme. Always love talking to you. Matthew Goodwin, a Professor of Politics at the University of Kent. Well, let's talk to Dawn Neeson about this. Dawn, I mean, a lot of people out there cheering, saying, at last, Theresa May first announced this as Home Secretary. That was almost 10 years ago. Finally, it seems like we're going to get it.
Well, I mean, both commentators made an awful lot of sense there, I thought. But I think the one thing that most people will be taking away from this is the phrase common sense. I think for most people in this country, it's a common sense aspect of everything around the legal case, the Rwandan situation, the boat migrants, that is confusing. There were a couple of people that have recently travelled over in the boats, and one was a chap from Vietnam who used the Human Rights Article 8, which is the right to a family life, to say he couldn't be sent back to Vietnam because he was at risk of money sharks. Now, this is what most people don't understand, Alex. They don't understand why common sense isn't applied to that, because that has nothing to do with human rights. That's nothing to do with Article 8. That's nothing to do with your family life. That is just an excuse for not being in one country and being in this country. So I think most people in this country agree that the most important thing here is stopping the trafficking of people across that channel. And that is where people that are genuinely seeking refuge are being ignored and overlooked by the people that are really... I mean, what's the phrase? I mean, they're taking the mickey. I mean, and we all know. And if you deny that people coming over are sort of like some of them are actually using the Bill of Human Rights for their own good, then you're lying to yourself. And I think that the fact that now that if we can get this through, and I hope we can, that the new Bill of Rights will actually apply common sense to everything, will apply to criminals. I mean, we all know the cases. There are rapists that are sort of like commit the most awful crimes in this country and then complain human rights because deprive them of seeing their wife and children if we deport them. And, hello, well, shouldn't you have thought of that before you committed your crimes?
Dawn, thank you. I want to know your views. Email me gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet to the programme @GBNews. You are with GB News on TV and radio. Coming up, with inflation hitting a 40-year high and the price of pretty much everything going up, I'm asking, what can we do to tackle the cost of living crisis? Time for a short break now. A cup of tea and a check on the weather forecast. See you in a bit.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. The weather is on the change over the next few days, but today, if you like blue sky, well, you're in for a treat. Certainly across most of England and Wales, it's fine, sunny and warmer than yesterday. It is a little cloudy across the northwest thanks to this weather front, and this one is approaching from the south, and that one could bring us some heavy downpours later tomorrow. But for today, as I said, most places set fair, dry, fine, lots of sunshine. Sunny skies for eastern and southern Scotland, but a bit more cloud for Northern Ireland, certainly northwest Scotland. Quite windy in the far northwest as well. Elsewhere, the winds are light and the sun is really lifting those temperatures. A little bit warmer than yesterday, 25 to 28 degrees Celsius. Always a bit cooler on some coasts, but probably the south coast a little warmer than today. Obviously, it's still going to be cool with the brisk winds and the cloud across the far northwest, where there'll continue to be a bit of patchy rain through this evening. Generally a fine summer's evening, however, for the vast majority. But later in the night, just notice this, the threat of thunderstorms moving up from France. A fairly warm night with temperatures holding up in the low teens. On to Thursday, many places will again start with plenty of sunshine. More cloud for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland again. Some patchy rain in the far north. In the southeast, though, there is the risk of those thunderstorms moving up. And then during the day, we're expecting more heavy showers with the risk of thunderstorms to break out across parts of England and Wales. They could be pretty big storms as well. Before they arrive across northern England, the North Midlands, we could get close to 30 degrees Celsius. So another very warm day here. Not as warm in the south. Now, the downpours that we see tomorrow, they'll be hit and miss, but as I say, they could cause some disruption. A lot of rain falling in a short space of time, the risk of large hail and gusty winds too, and the threat of those heavy showers drifting northwards during Thursday evening. Then all change with the weather turning much more showery and much cooler as we head through the weekend.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Today, the increase in the price of everything has almost crept up into double digits, with inflation rising at the fastest rate for 40 years. Is the cost of living crisis set to spiral out of control? Is the government too cowardly to make big decisions to put out the economic inferno? Will the Bank of England have to inflict more interest rate misery on the country to douse the flames of inflation? One thing is for sure, though, things aren't getting better. Not today, nor tomorrow, unless something changes. And soon. Well, GB News East of England reporter Ed Crawford is in Cambridge for us now. Ed, what are people saying about the impact on their lives?
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, I've been going around Cambridge today and I've been speaking to all sorts of people, builders, taxi drivers, hotel owners, cafe owners, and a lot of people are talking about the cost of living crisis. Yes, inflation is now up to 9.1%, but the big thing on people's minds is electricity prices. I spoke to one cafe owner who told me 2 years ago his electricity bill was 130 and now it is 613. He's been forced to sign a contract, obviously contract for £500, and that's for 300 years. £500 a month for 300 years. To him, he says that's extortionate, and that really puts his business at risk. I've been speaking to a few builders merchants in Cambridge, and they've been echoing what a lot of people across the country are saying, that importation of building materials is still haphazard, and it's still the cost is spiralling. And of course, Cambridge is a fantastic student town. There's lots of cool students hanging around doing their thing. A few guys were off to Glastonbury and I stopped them and I asked them, you know, what's your biggest concern? A lot of them were saying house prices have been out of control for a long time, and for them the idea of getting their foot on the property ladder seems completely unobtainable at the moment. some of the hoteliers that I've been speaking to are saying that the rail strikes are having a bit of an impact on their business as well, because they're used to having commuters stopping off in their hotels, using their facilities and then hopping off in the morning. And now this has sort of stopped this week. So they're a bit worried that if these strikes continue, there's going to be trouble ahead.
Ed, thanks for that. That's a really frank and comprehensive snapshot of what's going on out there in England. Interesting stuff. Well, let's talk to my studio guest for the day, former editor of the Star newspaper, Dawn Neeson. I mean, that guy with the cafe and the electricity bill.
We looked at each other and went, what?
I know.
What? Yeah, that wasn't helping. Yeah, thanks for that.
That's criminal, isn't it?
I know. It's just absolutely terrifying. And it's like...
But these are real things that are happening around the country. And it's interesting there that the things he's talking about, you know, the small business owners who are thinking, how do I run my business when I can't pay the energy bills vital to open the doors of your cafe every morning? Students there who are saying, well, how are we going to get on the housing ladder? Wait till you're still saying the same thing at the age of 40. And the government, they talk the talk, don't they? But they don't seem to be doing anything. Nobody's walking the walk.
This is what this government have turned into an art form. It's like they say what people want to hear, and then they don't do it. Meanwhile, the opposition don't actually say anything and don't do it. So we're caught in the middle of this mess at the moment, and everybody, as we've just heard, is really feeling the pinch. I mean, going back to the Glastonbury thing, it's like, if you're going to Glastonbury, you're afforded £300 for a ticket. In any case, Alex, I mean, that's a lot of money at the moment. I don't know how anyone's going to gigs this year. They're extortionately expensive. Again, cost of inflation, maybe. But, I mean, it's like, the more you dig down into this, the more you can't see an end to it. I mean, we're predicted to hit 11, possibly 13% by the end of this year now. And sort of like, basically, the ideal inflation rate is 2%. That is the ideal according to economists. And we are going to be so far from that, aren't we? We're never going to get back there. And, you know, it's just that the government don't know what the answer is quite clearly. And it's like, well, don't demand higher wages because that increases inflation, because businesses and services have to put their prices up, then that fuels more inflation. At the same time, MPs gave themselves a pay rise. There's the triple lock on the pensions now, which is, again, helping pensions out, which is brilliant. But is it equal then for everybody? Like, you know, we all know that we are facing a summer of discontent with so many people going on strike, demanding inflation-matching wages, which this country can't afford to do. And it's just like, no, what I think we're all feeling frustrated with now, Alex, is nobody's coming up with an answer.
I've started making soups again. That's my answer to everything.
I have. Some in for us?
Using up all my scraps, bits and bobs.
Talking of food, the one, and I don't know why this is stuck in my head, but the price of a chicken or turkey dinner is going to double from last Christmas to this Christmas. So your Christmas dinner is going to cost twice as much. I mean, in the scheme of things,
soups,
it's quite well, but...
bubble and squeak, mutant vegetable bakes, you know, the staples of British cooking. That's how to deal with a cost of living crisis. You're with GB News on TV and DAB radio. Coming up, we know Will Smith feels strongly about it because of his wife's alopecia. It's been revealed that here in the UK, a third of women have reported similar problems. We're going to be discussing hair loss next. Now, though, it's time for a check on the news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 2:32. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Wiltshire police are investigating the death of a soldier who was killed during a training exercise on Salisbury Plain. The 26-year-old man sustained head injuries after he was involved in a collision with a warrior armoured vehicle yesterday morning. He's been identified as a member of 5th Battalion, the Rifles. The number of people killed during an earthquake in eastern Afghanistan now stands at over 1,000. A local official says a further 1,500 people have also been injured during the 6.1 magnitude quake. It's feared the death toll will continue to rise as emergency services reach remote villages. A national incident has been declared here in the UK after polio was detected in sewage samples in East London. The virus, which was officially eradicated in the UK in 2003, was discovered at a treatment works. The UK Health Security Agency is urging members of the public to ensure their vaccines are up to date. Now, while the risk of contamination is low, people are being warned the virus can cause paralysis and, in rare cases, death. The Labour leader has gone head-to-head with the Prime Minister as voters prepare to go to the polls for two crucial by-elections. Sir Keir Starmer accused Boris Johnson of failing to prevent this week's national rail strikes by refusing to meet with unions and operators. Boris Johnson responded by saying the Labour leader is in the pocket of the unions, unable to punish 25 of his MPs who joined yesterday's picket lines. Inflation has hit its highest level in 40 years, climbing to 9.1% in May, up from 9% in April. The rising cost of food and non-alcoholic goods were the main driver, further squeezing household budgets. The Chancellor says the government is doing everything it can to reduce the figure. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Alex will be back in a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
we're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, the Tory party is having to fight on all fronts at the moment. No sooner had Boris apparently got Brexit done, there was a pandemic, then war in Europe, and now the blaring sirens of economic apocalypse. So much for the manifesto pledge to build back better. But two key by-elections will test the government even more this week. In one, they have to appeal to the Red Wall Labour voters they managed to attract, who largely backed Brexit and want to see their standards of living vastly improve. In the other, they need to show the Red Trouser Party faithful that they're still on their side too, to stop them sniffing around the Lib Dems. Not an easy task for a government who are going to have to make some pretty unpopular decisions to stop the economy from imploding. Well, first, we go to Tiverton and Honiton. The vacancy there was caused by the resignation of Neil Parish after that tractor porn scandal, where colleagues accused him of watching X-rated material on his phone on the green benches. Our South West reporter, Jeff Moody, is in Devon, finding out what voters there are thinking.
Tranquil, trusting and Tory. They voted Conservative here since the 1930s, but in this rural backwater, many traditional voters are now no longer going with the flow. And it's almost inconceivable such has been Conservative support here. They backed Brexit by 58%. They have an ageing population, 28% are over 65, and unemployment is low. But this by-election is not just about the policies. This is Conservative heartland, the rural agricultural southwest. It should be an easy win for the Conservatives. But talking to people on the streets of Tiverton and Honiton today, it's not the policies they're so concerned with, it's the man.
Partygate just exemplifies the attitude that seems to be that rules are for poor people, not for the governing body.
Fair enough, give them a fine.
That's it. Don't have to be such a big thing and a big, oh, they've done wrong.
We need a very strong leader and one that will get things going, such as Boris Johnson did with the vaccines and all of those issues. You also need someone with integrity. And so that's why I haven't decided yet.
There's residue too from the resignation of their former MP, Neil Parish.
Extremely bad. Watching pornography when he should have been doing something else. He was supposed to be watching tractors, but he wasn't watching about tractors.
Well, I wouldn't lump together a whole party based on the acts of one individual, so I'm glad that he's no longer in Parliament. But yeah, I feel like the Conservatives is the main vote for like the Brexit supporting people.
We asked Labour and the Conservatives to talk to us. Both candidates said they're far too busy today meeting voters to talk to us. Well, busy they might be. The Conservatives have a 24,000 majority, but the Lib Dems are snapping at their heels, and that's making them anxious. At the Lib Dem campaign HQ, foot soldiers have been drafted in, and the party faithful are buoyed by an internal poll that puts them level pegging with the Tories.
The first thing people tend to want to talk about is Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. People often want to talk about issues of a lack of honesty and integrity at the top of politics. And it's not about Partygate per se, it's more around what that represents. It's more about lies told to Parliament and the resignation of ethics advisors, for example.
At the last election, just 15% voted for the Lib Dems, 60% went to the Conservatives. Turning this around will be a gargantuan feat for the Liberals. They think they can do it. The voters aren't so sure.
Well, what's the alternative? Put it that way. I can't see an alternative at the moment. I think they're giving Boris a pretty hard time and he doesn't deserve it. By and large, he's doing OK.
And that's the question that people here are asking themselves. Is OK enough? Or is Partygate now just water under the bridge? Jeff Moody, GB News.
Well, in the next hour, we'll be travelling up to Wakefield with news about the second by-election where the Conservatives are vying to hang on to a red wall seat. And here's a taster of what voters there have to say.
I think Conservatives get a bit tired of Wakefield. They haven't done a lot for Wakefield. Obviously, with what's gone off with the previous MP, which we can't really say a lot about, but that's what it is. I think we've been neglected.
Voting for the Conservatives.
And why is that?
Because I think the other two major parties are not satisfactory.
Why not?
Well, I find the Liberals, with their alliance with the SDP, the new Liberals, not that the old Liberals that I used to support. And I don't support New Labour. I don't support social democracy. So put a stop to the old democratic opposition to the Conservative Party, supporting the working classes. That's Labour's traditional role in society, and we haven't got that anymore.
My mum and dad used to vote for them, so I voted Labour all the time. So that's all I do. Just vote Labour, that'll do for me.
Ah, the good people of Wakefield there. I've got to do my due diligence and tell you about the 15 candidates standing in Wakefield. They are Sir Archibald Stanton Earl Eaton from the official Monster Raving Loony Party, Nadeem Ahmed for the Conservatives, Akef Akbar, who's independent, Paul Bickerdike from the Christian People's Alliance, Mick Dodgson of the Freedom Alliance, Jada Franson, an independent, Jordan Gaskell for the UK Independence Party, David Hurdson of the Yorkshire Party, Therese Hurst from the English Democrats, Christopher Jones, Northern Independence Party, Simon Lightwood for Labour, Jamie Needle from the Liberal Democrats, Ash Routh of the Green Party, Ashley Simon from Britain First, and Chris Walsh from Reform UK. There are 8 candidates standing in the Tiverton and Honiton by-election. I feel like I'm conducting the commentary of a horse race here. They are Jordan Donoghue-Morgan for the Heritage Party, Andy Fone for Reform UK, Richard Ford for the Liberal Democrats, Helen Herford for the Conservatives, Liz Pole for Labour, Frankie Ruffolo for the Britain Movement, Ben Walker for UKIP and Jill Westcott for the Green Party. Oh, Dawn, time for you to talk because I'm out of breath.
Breathe. Oh, gosh almighty.
What I find interesting, listening to the first lot of Vox Pops from Tiverton, was Partygate came up again. The media have shut up about it, haven't they? But it does seem to me that this conveyor belt of policies that's coming out, people go, yeah, we like the sound of it, but they don't really trust Boris anymore, do they?
They don't trust Boris, and I was very interested, like you, that Partygate came up. I think Partygate now has almost, though, become a shorthand, Alex, for hypocrisy. And it's like, you know, we have our rules that we follow, but you follow the rules we give you. And so I think that is what voters are talking about when they talk to Partygate now. I don't think it's the fact that anyone was ambushed by a cake or had a beer and a curry. I think it is the fact that both parties seem to have rules that they follow and then expect us to do something completely different. And I think what was interesting from the Wakefield chap that we interviewed was the traditional values of Labour. And my dad was a union rep, he was a strong Labour voter all his life. And now if he came back today and looked at the modern-day Labour Party, which the clue's in the title, Labour, they don't seem to be for that anymore. And that is what I think is confusing most people. It's like our traditional Conservative values, Labour values, they're not what the parties stand for anymore. And to be honest with you, I mean, you know, the Lib Dems, it's like, it is going to be a protest vote, I think, in some areas, because it's like, I don't know who to vote for. Whether I'm traditional Conservative, traditional Labour, am I going to vote Lib Dems as a protest vote? Or a Green vote, or something like that?
It's funny, isn't it, talking about that, because there's always this sort of typecast of the Labour swing voter, Workington man, and now you've got what's being called Waitrose woman, the voter who might have always voted Tory and are being tempted by the Lib Dems, who might not like the sort of boom and braggadocio of Boris politics.
It is. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you've got Boris politics, which is basically Boris's personality. Because, as we've said earlier on, you know, they say one thing and then don't do it, but everybody knows who Boris Johnson is. I mean, that is the thing. Keir Starmer, on the other hand, people know who Keir Starmer is, but they know who Keir Starmer is because he never actually says or does anything. And sort of like, you know, Labour now just seem to be under Keir Starmer. I'm not saying everybody in the party, but they seem to be the party for the woke, worried, don't want to upset or offend anyone party. And that's not what Labour should be about. They should be fighting for the working classes, whatever the working classes actually even are these days.
Dawn, thank you so much. Well, there you go. We've given a lot of airtime about the Conservatives and Labour Party, but as you heard, there's a gazillion other candidates you can also vote for. Now, the moment Will Smith strode onto the stage and walloped Chris Rock in the mush at the Oscars sent shockwaves around the world. Yep, you all remember that. The comedian had made a joke about the Hollywood actor's wife, Jada's alopecia, a condition that made most of her hair fall out. Was he right in protecting the dignity of his missus, who looked far from impressed at being the subject of the gag? Well, for a lot of women, hair loss is no joke, but a painful and very real taboo. Gail Porter, once a model and massive TV star of the 90s, became better known in recent years for her struggle with the condition, bravely showing the world what many others desperately try to hide. There are multiple reasons that women lose their hair, and it's a lot more common than you think. Yet what on the surface may seem a superficial issue actually leaves sufferers distraught, especially in a society with increasingly high beauty standards. Well, more than a third of women, 39%, say they have suffered from hair loss. In addition, 61% of women say lack of awareness around the issue has left them feeling sad and embarrassed. Nearly half of women surveyed said they were devastated when they first realised they were losing their hair. We can talk now to hairdresser and author of The Mindful Hairdresser, Jordana Corbella. Jordana, thanks for coming on. I mean, this is something that a lot of people don't talk about. So tell us, why are you here talking to us about it today?
Well, I guess I'm here on behalf of hairdressers because I do think it's super important for us to remove the stigma attached to female hair loss, and it should be dealt with separately because unfortunately a lot of the products that are available on the market right now are designed for male hair loss, which is arguably slightly more acceptable. However, a staggering 45% of females will lose their hair at some point in their life and will experience hair thinning at least. And I think the conversation should start with your hairdresser, because we are most likely to observe that much earlier than you are. By the time you have, 37% of your hair may have already been thinning and lost.
What are the main reasons behind hair loss? I mean, everyone by now knows about alopecia, a dreadful and often recurrent condition. But what other reasons might women suddenly find that their luscious locks are no more?
Well, unfortunately, the hair and scalp condition is a very delicate, sensitive ecosystem that needs a lot of environmental factors to line up for it to be the optimal hair growth and scalp conditions. So factors such as hormonal changes, lifestyle changes, nutrition, what you're using or products you're using, overloading of parabens or silicons, which need to be thrown in the bin. So there's a multifaceted, factored approach, and we would kind of approach it at 360 and address the underlying symptoms, the underlying causes, because it's not a one-size-fits-all with hair loss.
And what do a lot of women do when they find that they are losing their hair? Do they resort to wearing wigs? Are there sort of certain hairstyles? What can they do?
Unfortunately, most women kind of try and fix it by, putting a Band-Aid on it, perhaps wearing extensions or creating the illusion of thickness with certain products. But fortunately enough, what we can do is we can help prevent it. And prevention is really key here, because it's a lot easier to prevent than it is to treat it after. However, there are so many things we can do once we have lost our hair. Particularly many of my clients who have had hair loss post breastfeeding, the good news is that those follicles are lying dormant, and all it takes is a concoction of ingredients to reawaken those hair follicles. So there are so many things you can do.
Thanks for coming on, Jordana, and thank you for giving women out there a lot of information that a surprising number actually need. It's a topic that is shrouded in taboo and pretty horrible for those people who are suffering from it. It's Jordana Cabela there, who's a hairdresser and author. Time now for a check on the weather forecast. I'll be back with a roundup of other stories that have caught our attention today on We Need to Talk About, including the warning that President Putin is ready to use his Satan II nuclear missile. That's after the break.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. The weather is on the change over the next few days, but today, if you like blue sky, well, you're in for a treat. Certainly across most of England and Wales, it's fine, sunny and warmer than yesterday. It is a little cloudy across the northwest thanks to this weather front, and this one is approaching from the south, and that one could bring us some heavy downpours later tomorrow. But for today, as I said, most places set fair, dry, fine, lots of sunshine. Sunny skies for eastern and southern Scotland, but a bit more cloud for Northern Ireland, certainly northwest Scotland. Quite windy in the far northwest as well. Elsewhere, the winds are light and the sun is really lifting those temperatures. A little bit warmer than yesterday, 25 to 28 degrees Celsius. Always a bit cooler on some coasts, but probably the south coast a little warmer than today. Obviously, it's still going to be cool with the brisk winds and the cloud across the far northwest, where there'll continue to be a bit of patchy rain through this evening. Generally a fine summer's evening, however, for the vast majority. But later in the night, just notice this, the threat of thunderstorms moving up from France. A fairly warm night with temperatures holding up in the low teens. On to Thursday, many places will again start with plenty of sunshine. More cloud for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland again. Some patchy rain in the far north. In the southeast, though, there is the risk of those thunderstorms moving up. And then during the day, we're expecting more heavy showers with the risk of thunderstorms to break out across parts of England and Wales. They could be pretty big storms as well. Before they arrive across northern England, the North Midlands, we could get close to 30 degrees Celsius. So another very warm day here. Not as warm in the south. Now, the downpours that we see tomorrow, they'll be hit and miss, but as I say, they could cause some disruption. A lot of rain falling in a short space of time, the risk of large hail and gusty winds too, and the threat of those heavy showers drifting northwards during Thursday evening. Then all change with the weather turning much more showery and much cooler as we head through the weekend.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio. On digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
News just in that a couple from Bristol who kept modern-day slaves to run their car wash business have been sentenced for a total of 25 years. Maros Tankos and Joanna Gamulska denied the charges, but after a 3-month trial at Bristol Crown Court, the pair were found guilty of 19 offences of people smuggling. Our South West England reporter Jeff Moody has the story.
They described it as the gates of hell. Slovakian men coming to the UK for a better life. It turned out to be no life at all.
I knew deep inside he was lying to us. He was a fraudster. I was living in an unknown country. I didn't know what to do.
Each morning they were escorted to work against their will. They were paid nothing. By day they worked in Maros Tankos and Joanna Gamulska's car wash. By night they were imprisoned in the couple's home, sleeping on dirty mattresses. 10 of them packed into a tiny room. They were hit, they were abused, they were frightened for their lives. And that's just the start of it. Tankos and Gamulska took their victims' identity documents and phones, trapping them in a country that had promised them so much. Over a 9-year period, the couple opened bank accounts in their names, took out loans, maxed out credit cards. All in all, they stole £300,000. They bought cars, expensive holidays, and gambled the rest. When the couple were arrested, police said the victims were living like they were possessions, modern-day slaves. The couple from Bristol denied all charges, but after a 3-month trial, Tankos was convicted of 10 offences of human trafficking, Gamulska 9. The victims had been recruited from orphanages and camps in Slovakia. They thought Britain was their happy ending. But one victim, now back home, says, when I think of England now, I just feel bad. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Yeah, dreadful story there, and probably one of many. Well, every day before the show, my team and I delve into the stories making the headlines and those making a splash on social media. But because we don't have time to get into all of it, we bring you the update, a roundup of burning issues that caught our eye. Well, Emmanuel Macron is going to really struggle to form any sort of meaningful government following a trammelling in the recent French National Assembly elections, and he's been in hiding ever since. He can't rely on the support of Sarkozy's old party, who were almost wiped out in the presidential runoffs, but now have 64 crucial MPs. They've decided they don't want to prop him up and would rather make his life a misery in opposition. The 75 MPs from the far-left parties won't even form a coalition between themselves and are threatening to bring Gilets jaunes protests right into the heart of government, with votes of no confidence from next month. Macron, therefore, is having to go cap in hand to firebrand and presidential opponent Marine Le Pen, who's hardly minded to prop up his agenda. It's going to be a long, hot summer for France. And another day, another blood-curdling threat from Putin, as the Russian despot shows off his Satan II nuclear missile, which could reach and wipe out Britain in 3 minutes. There it is. It's the latest weapon of mass destruction the warmonger is bragging about in his efforts to intimidate the world from responding to his invasion of Ukraine. In a speech to military graduates, doubtless designed to be picked up by the world's media, he promised to boost the Russian army and put the first batch of Sarmat ballistics into deployment by the end of the year, said to be the world's longest-range intercontinental weapon, capable of striking over 11,000 miles away. Let's just hope it's another load of Russian rhetoric. Well, Dawn, Macron, Putin, little man, big man.
Well, Macron first, OK, right? So this is the chap that can't actually stop any illegal migrants crossing the channel.
Oh, he can. He doesn't want to, does he?
Well, quite. So he couldn't quite. He could spot one British trawler, but he can't spot thousands of people in the little dinghies leaving his shores. OK, so my heart's bleeding for him. World's smallest violin for him. And then Putin. Look, we know where we are with men with big weapons of mass destruction. You know what it says about them, Alex, and that was a very big one, wasn't it?
Well, the thing is, it's like Peter and Wolf, isn't it? Because he just bangs on about his nuclear threats all the time. And
yeah, every time he feels like he might be sort of like getting a bit bad blood, he just rolls out another big weapon.
Yeah.
I mean, you know.
Well, he's a big weapon, isn't he? Dawn, thank you ever so much. You're with Alex Phillips, joined by Dawn Newsom on GB News, on TV, online and on digital radio. And we still have lots more to do, so do join us again after this. Well, you're with me, Alex Phillips, on GB News. And with me for the next hour, we'll be discussing and debating the things that we really need to talk about. Still with me is Dawn Newsom, columnist and former editor of the Daily Star. And here's what we're discussing on the second half of this show. A British Bill of Rights has been proposed once again in a bid to stop judges in Strasbourg blocking British courts from deporting people. Can it work? Is it right? Plus, a devastating earthquake in Afghanistan, a country already crippled since foreign aid was cut off when the Taliban took over. Almost 1,000 reported dead already, but who is ready to help? And we'll be debating whether the Commonwealth is a fusty relic or an incredible international force for good in our globalised world. That's what we're talking about for the next hour. What do you want to talk about? Keep your emails coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet the programme @GBNews. First, though, it is time for the GB News headlines. Good afternoon. It's just 1 minute past 3. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Wiltshire police are investigating the death of a soldier who was killed during a training exercise on Salisbury Plain. The 26-year-old man sustained head injuries after he was involved in a collision with a warrior armoured vehicle yesterday morning. He's been identified as a member of 5th Battalion, the Rifles. In eastern Afghanistan, the number of people killed during an earthquake stands at over 1,000. A local official says a further 1,500 people have also been injured. The 6.1 magnitude quake struck early this morning, reducing homes to rubble. Rescue operations are underway, but it's feared the death toll will continue to rise as emergency services reach remote villages. A national incident has been declared after polio was detected in sewage samples in London. The virus was officially eradicated in the UK in 2003. Well, it was discovered at a treatment works which serves 4 million people in the north and east of the capital. The UK Health Security Agency is urging members of the public to ensure their vaccines are up to date. Now, while the risk of contamination is low, people are being warned the virus can cause paralysis and, in rare cases, death. The Labour leader has gone head-to-head with the Prime Minister as voters prepare to go to the polls for two crucial by-elections. Sir Keir Starmer accused Boris Johnson of failing to prevent this week's national rail strikes by refusing to meet with unions and operators. As the country deals with the biggest walkout by train staff in 3 decades, the Labour leader said the Prime Minister's only interest in blaming everyone else.
The Prime Minister of this country and his Transport Secretary haven't attended a single meeting, held a conversation or lifted a finger to stop these strikes. So rather than blame everyone else, why doesn't he do his job, get round the table and get the trains running?
Boris Johnson responded by saying the Labour leader is in the pocket of the unions.
Strikes, as he knows, it is up to the railway companies to negotiate, and that is their job. We know why he takes the line he does. We know why he won't condemn the strikes. We know why even now he hasn't got the gumption to call out his MPs who are going out to support the pickets, Mr. Speaker. The reason his authority is on the line in this matter is that they take £10 million from the unions, Mr. Speaker.
Inflation has hit its highest level in 40 years, climbing to 9.1% in May, up from 9% in April. The rising cost of food and non-alcoholic goods were the main driver, further squeezing household budgets. Last week, the Bank of England warned inflation was likely to peak at more than 11% in October. The Chancellor says the government's doing everything it can to reduce the figure.
I want people to be reassured that we have all the tools we need and the determination to reduce inflation and bring it back down. Firstly, the Bank of England will act forcefully to combat inflation. Secondly, the government will be responsible with borrowing and debt so we don't make the situation worse and drive up people's mortgage rates any more than they're going to go up. And lastly, we're improving the productivity of our economy, improving the supplies of energy we have and moving people off welfare into work.
A report on police failures into Rotherham child sexual exploitation has failed to identify any individual accountability. The Independent Office for Police Conduct investigated a total of 47 officers after it was revealed at least 1,400 girls were abused, trafficked and groomed in the town between 1997 and 2013. The final report confirmed that no officer lost their job despite 265 allegations. South Yorkshire Police admitted they let victims down and failed to protect vulnerable children. The Deputy Prime Minister has outlined new legislation which gives the UK power to override rulings by the European Court of Human Rights. It's after the European Court blocked the first deportation flight carrying asylum seekers to Rwanda last week. Dominic Raab told MPs the UK's new Bill of Rights will place ultimate legal power in the hands of the UK's Supreme Court.
Mr. Speaker, next we will strengthen the separation of powers in this country, affirming the supremacy of the Supreme Court, being explicit that the UK courts are under no obligation to follow the Strasbourg case law and indeed are free to diverge from it. I'm proud of our world-beating judiciary. And what else is the point? What else is the point of a Supreme Court if it bows in subordination to a European one?
Glastonbury has officially opened after a 3-year hiatus because of the pandemic. Traffic has been busy around the site in Somerset as thousands of festival goers opt to drive rather than take the train. The event's celebrating its 50th anniversary with acts including Ukraine's Eurovision Song Contest winners Kalish Orchestra. Now, on Saturday, Sir Paul McCartney will also become the oldest ever solo artist to headline the festival at the age of 80. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now we'll head back to Alex for We Need to Talk About. So, a plan to introduce new laws to allow UK judges to ignore the rulings of the European Court of Human Rights has been set out by the government. The Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, presented the Bill of Rights to Parliament today. It comes days after a Strasbourg judge blocked the government's first attempt to deport asylum seekers from the UK to Rwanda. The government says it wants a new Bill of Rights to strengthen freedom of speech and curb bogus human rights claims. Well, let's listen to what Dominic Raab has had to say.
What this bill will do is it will replace the Human Rights Act, reinforce our quintessentially British liberties like freedom of speech, the liberty that guards the others, give it higher pecking order in the hierarchy of rights, greater weight attached to it. I think that's important. But also curb some of the abuses of human rights that we've seen with very elastic interpretations fuelled by the Human Rights Act, which, just to give you an illustration, have allowed foreign criminals to trump deportation orders with very opaque, elastic interpretations of things like the right to family life. And that's the kind of common sense approach that will restore to our justice system.
But is Global Britain one of the founders of the convention and proud to have the Mother of Parliaments, setting a dangerous precedent to the rest of the world? Will the bill even do what it says on the tin? And are judges in Strasbourg actually right to block the deportation of migrants to Rwanda, a country over 6,000 miles away? Well, joining me first is Steve Valdez-Simmons from Amnesty International UK. Steve, I can imagine that you're probably not a fan of what Dominic Raab has announced today. But, you know, when he talks there about abuses of human rights with elastic interpretations, and you can see mounting public frustration at the way the government is being prevented from doing anything about the migrant crisis, what can be done? What should be done?
Well, the first thing that should be done is Dominic Raab should stop spouting nonsense, informing the British government, as the British people, misinforming them as to what happens in our courts. It's palpably not true that there have been elastic interpretations of Article 8, for example, over the last few years. In fact, unfortunately, what has happened is increasingly governments, including his own, have passed laws to instruct our courts what they are not permitted to take into account when determining these cases. Far from having confidence in our judges, this government has taken away the capacity for them to do the ordinary thing of simply assessing the case in front of them and ruling on it. And of course, that means it's increasingly necessary for things to reach to the European Court of Human Rights, because our government won't allow our courts to do their own job.
Steve, I want to ask you some questions that I'd imagine viewers might want to ask, because, of course, the British Bill of Rights has yet again bubbled up to the forefront, given that the Rwanda flight couldn't take off. And I think what most people probably want to know are who were those people who were on that flight, or supposed to be on that flight, who won their legal cases to be taken off it? Are they in desperate need? Should we be giving them shelter?
Well, all the 11 people who were the final people after legal action who were facing that expulsion when the High Court dealt with the decision, I think it was on the 13th of June now, those 11 people were people who had sought asylum in this country, as they are entitled under international law to do. None of them had any connection whatsoever with Rwanda. Some of them may well have had connections with this country. They were 11 people after they had been whittled down from 37, whom the Home Office had initially sought to place on that flight, whom legal action had shown should not be on the flight. And they were people who it is still yet to be decided by our courts whether their expulsion to Rwanda is under our laws lawful or not. What the Strasbourg court, the European court, decided, which our courts did not, was that it was improper for that flight to go ahead before it had even been decided by our courts whether it was legal to expel these people or not.
Steve, there's often a big distinction made between so-called economic migrants and those fleeing war. And I personally have little doubts that anyone getting on a boat is doing that because it looks like fun and games. I'd imagine a lot of them are pretty desperate. But the big question is, where are they coming from and why? Why and how are they getting here?
Well, the larger number of people who make the crossing of the Channel, and indeed the larger number of people who were singled out to be expelled to Rwanda, were Sudanese, Syrians, Afghans, Iranians, although not so many Iranians were put forward for the flight, and Iraqis. Now, if you look at our decision-making at the Home Office, forget the courts, at the Home Office, the vast majority of people who seek asylum in our country from those countries are found to be refugees. Not simply that they have legitimately made claims, but have been unable to substantiate them, actually have legitimately made claims that are good claims and entitle them to asylum. So it really beggars belief that they are habitually presented by our politicians, our Home Secretary, as anything other than what they are. People legitimately seeking asylum, most of whom entitled to it.
Steve, thank you so much for coming on and telling us that. I think it is really important to continue to put that message across as well. Steve Valdez-Simmons there from Amnesty International UK. Well, some of the government's critics are raising their eyebrows at the proposal for a British Bill of Rights, which legal experts say has no teeth and is at best a PR exercise designed to win over the public, increasingly angry about the migrant crisis that the government seems unable to control. Well, we can now speak to Chris Curtis, who's head of political polling at Opinion Research, to find out actually how the public are reacting to this. Chris, I mean, it's interesting hearing Steve Valdez there saying that a lot of these people on boats are desperate. They are people fleeing horrific situations in Sudan, which has got a huge amount of political instability, persecution. The rest of it is Syria, which we all know to be not exactly the most ideal place in the world to live. People coming from countries like Iran, Iraq, where political detainees are to a penny. But we seem to have lost sympathy with these people, haven't we? And yet the government are coming up with, it seems, more extreme measures to try and deal with this subject head on without sympathy. Where do the public stand on this?
Yeah, I'm not sure that's quite a fair description. Actually, all of the polling shows that the public has a lot of sympathy, for those who are fleeing, seeking asylum in this country and fleeing war and violence. And that's been consistently true in all of the polling that's been done for quite some time now. Even, during the EU referendum, when the public were really upset about immigration and into the UK, we saw the same sort of polling results then as well. But there's a slightly different question. So we know that the public want the UK to be accepting more refugees and people seeking asylum. While that's true, the thing that I think really upsets the public is a feeling that Britain doesn't have control over its borders. And that was one of the things that Britons didn't like, that drove them to vote to leave the European Union, that sort of lack of control. And I think with the boat crossings as well, that's also buying into this feeling that we don't have control over our borders. So those two things are true at the same time. We want control, but we want control whilst we're also having that sympathy with people who are fleeing really difficult circumstances.
So will the British Bill of Rights be the antidote to that? Is this going to go down well with a lot of voters, do you think?
I think it's very difficult to tell at this stage. I mean, it's worth noting that it's quite a complex argument that Dominic Raab's trying to make. I think what lots of people are going to be very upset by, particularly now we've left the European Union, is the idea that, it comes back to that control point, is British courts being told what to do by European courts and the power not being in the UK. And I think it's that kind of sentiment that the government is trying to feed into, which is a sentiment that's felt by many people across the country. I think the reason why this might not end up sort of making very much of a difference either way when it comes to the government's popularity is because it's sort of quite a complicated, difficult to understand argument that's quite distant really from most people's lives. At the moment, it doesn't matter what question you ask people in a focus group, they go back and go, my energy bill's going up, the cost of living is really difficult. And when you've got a government that's sort of talking about an issue that's very distant from that, I'm not sure that's going to sort of help them recover from their difficult situation in the polls.
Reacting to Matt Goodwin earlier on in my programme in the first hour, he's saying, immigration is still a top 3 issue in the UK. So in that regard, are the government right? I mean, we keep getting images of these boats crossing the channel. It seems that they've tried a number of things that haven't been successful. Are they right? Or is this essentially just sort of sticking the word British in front of something in the hope that it'll appeal to their base?
I mean, I wouldn't possibly be able to comment on that. But look. Ultimately, the government's in a really difficult situation, and they're quite obviously searching for what us pollsters call wedge issues. That is something they can hammer Labour on. They can go, we're on the side of the majority here, you're on the side of the minority, and we've seen that in a few different areas. We've seen that on the strikes this week. We've seen that with the Rwanda crossings. We've seen that a little bit with the Northern Ireland Protocol and this battle that's happening with Brexit. We're doing something that the majority agree on. Labour's on the side of, a small percentage of the population. That's what the government's trying to do. I think the reason that strategy doesn't seem to be working particularly effectively is because it's hard to be doing that when there is a much more important issue that is dominating the minds of voters. And that's basically what we're seeing with the cost of living crisis right now. It's also more difficult to make that argument when the Prime Minister isn't trusted. And that's something else we're seeing in the polls right now because of the effect of Partygate. So while these sort of policies, may be sort of quite divisive, may help the Conservative Party in some of those red wall seats, it still doesn't seem to be moving that overall dial back to the Conservatives, and I think those are the reasons.
Chris Curtis, it's always fascinating listening to you there. Do come on again and, demystify some more stuff in the future. Chris Curtis, who's the head of political polling at Opinion. Dawn, it's interesting, isn't it? Listening to what Chris was saying, and it's something I think we've spoken about before, the idea that the government wants to constantly create an us versus them scenario. We're trying to solve a problem, but all these dastardly other people are preventing us from doing it. The problem with following that strategy is the problem actually doesn't get solved.
It isn't yet solved, is it? And we all know that, this government all voted in on the controlling our borders and the migration issue, and that hasn't gone away. But we now have the cost of living, our own problem to worry about as well. And I think there are two issues that people are worried about. But going back to what our commentator was saying, it's like, people do care in this country. I mean, you've only got to look at, how we have, the ordinary people have treated the refugees coming from the Ukraine at the moment. The fact that so many people in this country are willing to open their homes to Ukrainian refugees. And before anyone shouts, oh, yeah, but they're blonde and blue-eyed, that's nothing to do with it, because that is so easy to say racism at every single issue these days, Alex. I mean, that is to do that they are women, mostly women and children, and they are fleeing a country that's actively being bombed. You go back to the mainly 90% of them are young, fit men coming over in the boats. And this is what I think. I mean, I can't talk for everyone, obviously, but I think most people in this country can't get their heads round. It's like, why are they? They're coming from France. They're young, fit men. Where are the women? Where are the children? Where are the elderly people? They're not in France. They're not in the French camps. We know that. So where are they? So I think this is what is confusing a lot of people in this country. And I think with Rab's, what he's been saying today, it's using the phrase common sense. And I think that is what is going to hopefully make people at least a little bit, well, that's what he thinks, hopefully will make people try to think that the UK Bill of Human Rights is a good thing to do. But I do resent the fact that people say we don't care in this country and we are racist and we are Little Englands, we don't care about refugees. We do care about refugees, and I really resent that people blame us for not being sort of like, the country we've always been welcoming, Alex. So, and I think whether the situation is going to get solved, whether this is just, as you say, another headline-grabbing act, more red meat for the voters, especially with the by-elections coming up in the next day or two. We can only wait and see.
We can wait and see on a lot of things, aren't we? And wait, we will continue to do. What is your take on this? GBViews at gbnews.uk on that topic or any of the others that we've been discussing. Or you can tweet us at GBNews so I get an impression of what you, the good old GB News viewer, really thinks. You are with GB News on TV and radio. Coming up, a powerful earthquake has hit Afghanistan, killing around 1,000 people. We'll talk to a UK-based organisation involved in the relief effort. Time for a short break now and a check on the weather forecast.
Hello, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. Plenty of fine sunny weather around this evening, but the weather is on the change. Still some hot sunshine tomorrow, but an increasing chance of seeing some thunderstorms and turning more showery generally as we head into the weekend. There is a weak weather front across the far north of Scotland, but actually it's the weather coming in from the south that's going to give us a few problems over the next 48 hours or so. Initially, though, very pleasant out there this evening. Warm, hazy, a balmy summer's evening, if you like. But notice down to the south, the threat of some heavy showers across the Channel Isles and they may well track across the channel during the early hours. Always the risk of a bit of patchy rain across the Northern Isles and the Western Isles, but for most it's a dry night, a pretty warm night. Temperatures in many towns and cities staying in the mid-teens. Another very warm and sunny day to come for many on Thursday. A lot of clouds still across Western Scotland, light today, and Northern Ireland, but it's further south where the cloud is likely to produce some heavy showers, initially across the southeast, but becoming more widespread over England and Wales as we go through the day. Now, not everywhere is going to see these big downpours, but where they do occur, they could cause some problems. Highest temperatures during tomorrow. Northern England, North Midlands, where we could push 30 Celsius. Many other places, though, into the low to mid-20s. But we do have this Met Office yellow warning in place for those thunderstorms. As I said, hit and miss. Not everywhere will see them, but where they do occur, they could cause some disruption, large hail, gusty winds, a lot of rain falling in a short space of time. Continued likelihood of heavy showers during the course of Thursday night and into Friday. And then out west, we've got these bands of rain starting to push in, and they will bring some wet weather to Northern Ireland. Greater chance again of seeing some heavy showers breaking out during the day across parts of England, across the Midlands and the northeast of England in particular. But the outlook is for the cooler and showery weather in the west to become more dominant. Temperature dropping off on Friday, dropping off further for Saturday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
Well, almost 1,000 people are known to have been killed so far and at least 600 more injured in an earthquake in East Afghanistan, according to Taliban officials. The country, already suffering a major food crisis as foreign aid dried up after the Taliban took over, is now crying out for help from aid agencies. Decades of conflict mean Afghanistan has been unable to develop, with buildings not able to cope with regular quake threats and few emergency services equipped to deal with the catastrophic fallout. Joining me live from Kabul is Mohammed Ghulam Sorwar from Islamic Relief. Mohammed, it's really, well, it's sad to have you on the programme, but thank you so much for joining us. Explain to us what's happened, how many people are currently accounted for, and how many do we not know who might still be trapped?
Thank you. You know, this Afghanistan, they're facing a huge crisis. The earthquake happened last month. For still now, we're getting around 1,000 people, and more than 50. The situation is actually still now where every hour we're in information that more people are dying. So,
yeah, Mohammed, I'm afraid I'm going to have to pause you just because our audio connection is not very good. I think there's a lot of interruption on the line, so we're only hearing every other word, and it's a really important topic. Do stay there. We're going to try and reconnect to you with a better signal. Don't go anywhere. I mean, Dawn, we didn't really get into the meat of the reality of what's going on with Mohammed there, but it's tragic, isn't it? I mean, this is a country that, you know, whatever you think of the Taliban, the people on the ground, the innocent people on the ground are suffering immensely.
It's the people that are suffering. It's always the ordinary people that are suffering in these situations, Alex. And, you know, you look at some of those, the footage we're seeing from Afghanistan, and it's just heartbreaking. And you know that, you know, so many people will have lost their lives and lost loved ones and lost everything they own, which isn't much at the moment. But the problem you've got with this is, you know, the Taliban, we know, despite their protests that they are, you know, the new woke Taliban, if you like, and they care for human rights, etc., etc. That's patently not true with the way they are treating women and children out there, in particular stopping young females going to school or studying, enforcing women to cover themselves from head to toe again. So there are all those issues going on. So stopping aid to that country to punish what they are doing has to be a good thing. But on the other hand, you're actually then punishing the very people that need that help. So but I mean, are the Taliban, if we do send them aid, start sending them aid again, are they going to use it to help the people that really need it?
Yeah, I mean, this is why often the charity sector, the NGOs, are the ones who get involved on the ground to try and distribute food parcels. Oh, I'm just being told that we can try to reconnect now with Mohammed. Let's see if that line is a little bit improved. Mohammed, can you hear me, and can we hear you?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh, this is a much better connection, thank you. So, yeah, bring us up to speed on what the situation is on the ground in Afghanistan right now.
Yeah, you know, Afghanistan has been facing like huge humanitarian crisis, last few months. And this earthquake, is hit last night, and it's created another, new crisis that is on province particularly. Till now, we observed that it's around 1,000 people have died, and people, thousands of houses damaged. And the drinking water supplies and all things are, destroyed in particular affected area. So more than 5,000 people, it would be more actually, are in need of, this humanitarian support. So this is actually very difficult situation currently people are facing, particularly the, affected, area that happened last night. And still now people need support. So far, actually, Islamic Relief, we are trying to reach to the people. We deployed our team to the in the ground. Tomorrow onward, we'll start distribution of the food package for the people, and gradually we'll support them for drinking water, essential items. And also definitely they need support for shelter because their house damaged actually. In Afghanistan, the houses are made by mud. So in the earthquake situations, its whole house is still actually destroyed. So they don't have any space now to stay. So they are staying in surrounding or somewhere, in a community place or in open sky. So it's very difficult situation for the people when they have been suffering last few months, huge economic crisis, less income. Now within this situation, when they are, they lost everything in their livelihoods, So you can imagine like how difficult situation people are, facing now. So they need support. They need humanitarian, particularly they need support immediately, and other organization, Islamic Relief, we're trying to support them actually.
Mohammed, thank you for coming back to us and talking to us more about the tragic situation unfolding in Afghanistan. Mohammed Gholam Solwar there from Islamic Relief. You with GB News on TV and DAB Radio. Coming up, I'll be debating whether the Commonwealth is a force for good in the world or an outdated, fusty relic. First, though, it's time for a check on the news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 3:32. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Now, the RMT says tomorrow's rail strike will go ahead after talks finished today without an agreement. The unions accused Transport Secretary Grant Shapps of wrecking negotiations. Well, RMT says it'll continue with industrial action until it reaches a settlement over job security and pay. Just 60% of trains are running today, despite there being no official strike, with some operators ending services earlier than usual ahead of another strike tomorrow. Wiltshire police are investigating the death of a soldier who was killed during a training exercise on Salisbury Plain. The 26-year-old man sustained head injuries after he was involved in a collision with a warrior armoured vehicle yesterday morning. He's been identified as a member of 5th Battalion, the Rifles. The number of people killed during an earthquake in eastern Afghanistan now stands at over 1,000. A local official says a further 1,500 people have also been injured during the 6.1 magnitude quake. It's feared the death toll will continue to rise as emergency services reach remote villages. A national incident has been declared after polio was detected in sewage samples in East London. The virus was officially eradicated in the UK in 2003, but it's been discovered at a treatment works. The UK Health Security Agency is urging members of the public to ensure their vaccines are up to date. Now, whilst the risk of contamination is low, people are being warned the virus can cause paralysis and, in rare cases, death. The Labour leader has gone head-to-head with Prime Minister Boris Johnson as voters prepare to go to the polls for 2 by-elections tomorrow. Sir Keir Starmer accused Boris Johnson of failing to prevent this week's national rail strikes by refusing to meet with unions and operators. Boris Johnson responded by saying the Labour leader is in the pocket of the unions, unable to punish 25 of his MPs who joined yesterday's picket lines. Inflation has hit its highest level in 40 years, climbing to 9.1% in May, up from 9% in April. The rising cost of food and non-alcoholic goods were the main drivers, further squeezing household budgets. The Chancellor says the government's doing everything it can to reduce the figure. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Shortly, we'll be back to We Need to Talk About.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.227 to the dollar. The pound is 1.162 to the euro. The price of gold currently stands at £1,502.01 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for real-time investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
The Commonwealth, an outdated, archaic relic from Britain's colonial past, or a vibrant and vital body of 54 nations, most of them once connected with the empire, but today representing a collective of countries from every corner of the earth, able to bring together a range of cultures and commerce in friendship and trade. Well, Commonwealth leaders are heading, perhaps quite appropriately, to Rwanda for the start of the annual summits tomorrow, where the hot topics will likely be Britain's deportation scheme, trade in a globalised world, and the future of the group when Charles becomes king. The UK is dispatching the big guns this year in the form of the Prince of Wales and the Prime Minister, proving just how important this government sees the Commonwealth in the 21st century and, indeed, for Brexit's Britain. Well, joining me in the studio to discuss the future of the Commonwealth is Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, the author and journalist Amy Nichol, and former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, is still with us. Amy, I'm going to start with you. Do you think the Commonwealth is fit for purpose, a 21st century model that we should be proud of, or is it time we just let it go?
Well, I think it's precisely what you said at the beginning. It's an outdated colonial relic if we're going to look to just the facts. And I don't even think many people know what it does or what it stands for anymore, because it has become so increasingly irrelevant. I haven't even seen any mention of what's going on in Rwanda today in the newspaper. But if I did want to say one thing, it is ironic that a membership community that underpins its values as promoting human rights and democracy would choose somewhere like Rwanda, where last time they tried to hold an international conference, they rounded up and detained all the LGBTQ plus people so that they wouldn't be seen in front of the conference. So I think the human rights is a little patchy. So I'm not sure it underpins those Commonwealth values.
Now, Calvin, I mean, listen to what Amy has to say. I'm sure you take a very different viewpoint. The Commonwealth, yes, it has different cultural values, as a lot of other countries do, but is it not important to bring all of these countries together? 54 of them, that's almost a third of the world getting round the table together.
Yeah, I mean, the British Empire was sacrificed in order to protect the world from fascism during World War I and World War II. And as a result of that sacrifice, the group of countries came together collectively, voluntarily, to form an organisation which is now known as the Commonwealth of Nations. And it's a good thing because A, it is voluntary, B, it is democratic, and C, it's a form of unity that brings us all together.
But
Yes,
what's
we have different cultural values, but collectively we can say we're stronger together than we are apart. And this is one of the reasons that I voted heavily in favour of Brexit, because I thought the Commonwealth are our cousins, they're our neighbours, they're people that fought alongside Britain in these wars, and they're people that we have disregarded and neglected over the last couple of decades. And we should actually be forming better trade relationships and better community relationships with these people.
So
and of course, next month we have the Commonwealth Games, which is a good example of the celebration of unity that the Commonwealth of Nations
So
brings.
they're good at sport and they promote cricket, that's great. But what have they actually, if they really are encouraging these better relations and everything, and this unity that you speak of and this equality that they say underpins their whole organisation, then why haven't we seen that? We've been debating this for like 2 decades about what is the use of the Commonwealth. So if it has proven ineffective, then surely it is redundant now.
It's very effective.
But in what way? So please tell me.
So the way diplomacy works is that we have countries relating to each other and getting around the table. And when you already have those relationships and those strong bonds that are built up over time, that helps. So it helps with trade deals with Canada. It helps with Australian, learning from the Australian policies for immigration. It helps with all of these issues that we have in our country that we're seeing abroad.
I don't think it's proven. I think it's very subjective that you would say it helps. And actually, 45% of people in Australia don't want to be part of the Commonwealth anymore. And 55% of Canadians don't want to be in the Commonwealth anymore. And I can't actually see any substance
is it that they don't want to
what
be,
it really does.
Is it that they don't want the UK, well, the royal family, the Queen as the head of state, rather than not being in the Commonwealth?
No, it's not be in the Commonwealth because it's been proven to be ineffective and pointless.
I don't know what you mean by it's been proven to be ineffective, but all these
they don't have any real
are
power.
a part of the Commonwealth.
They don't have the funding to promote anything that they say, and they don't have the authority to enforce anything that they say.
Because is it not about what the Commonwealth has done, but what it could do, perhaps, in a 21st century globalised world?
I think this is the point.
quite
I
a
think
while.
it needs modernising. I think we need to get away from the images of royals sort of like touring grandly in open-top Land Rovers, you know, stuck in the 50s. I think it does have potential. I think it needs modernising. And I was lucky enough to go to the Caribbean earlier this year, and the people there had been helped by the Commonwealth. I mean, in particular, education had been helped by the Commonwealth. And a lot of the people in the island of Ireland had the opportunity to travel for education posts because of the Commonwealth. So it is helping young people education.
But can I pick up on that? Because I know that it promotes university education. That's a privileged few in these countries. If you go to the majority of the however billion people are involved in the Commonwealth, the majority of them have
this was actually helping the youngsters, not even people at university age. It was helping youngsters at school to travel and to learn more about the world, and they wouldn't have necessarily had the opportunity. So it does do good. We don't hear about the good it does because we are so focusing on how negative everything is about, certainly, the UK at the moment and the Royals. And I do think, I mean, Charles being in Rwanda, and I just want to pick Amy up on one thing there about why is it being held in Rwanda, human rights? Well, we're holding the World Cup in Qatar, and they've got far worse human rights, to be fair to you. But, I mean, I think Charles needs to be very careful about where he takes it, and he's got the opportunity to modernise it now. I think there's a lot of loyalty to the Queen, but I think, you know, heaven forbid that it's not too soon that when we lose her, things do need to change.
I just want to briefly bring you back in, Calvin, because you mentioned about one of your reasons for voting Brexit was to re-engage with the Commonwealth. And the fact is, we couldn't make trade deals of our own when we were in the EU. Are you hoping, then, that something that the Commonwealth can do now, with Boris Johnson going over there, is to say, we can trade with these countries to elevate from poverty, and when you do that, they become more progressive societies?
Absolutely, because these are the countries we have the strongest relationships with, so it makes sense to work with those first to secure good trade deals. And you're right, we couldn't do that while we were in the EU. And just to address Amy's point, that most people want to leave. That's actually not the case. And, you know, my family from Jamaica, the last poll in Jamaica showed that the vast majority of people would have preferred to have remained part of the British Empire, never mind the British Commonwealth, because they see that we're stronger together. It makes sense economically, it makes sense culturally, and it makes sense because the systems we've brought across to all these different nations, from education, as Dawn mentioned, to hospitals, to charities, to the faith of Christianity, to the parliamentary system. It's like asking the question, what have the Romans ever done for us?
It's not. It's like making the question, why don't you just stay living with your parents forever? It increases the idea of dependence. And I think that a lot of countries feel is better, like a fart, better in than out.
No, they're not dependent on the UK. Because
and the dependence has
because it's
come
voluntary and optional.
from a history of colonialism.
Choose to leave the Commonwealth whenever you choose to.
Guys, it's been a fascinating debate, and I certainly could continue it for a long time. I love this debate, having lived in a lot of African countries and indeed in India. Amy, Calvin, fantastic having you on. Dawn, don't go anywhere. Now, on one hand, the Tories have to show their legacy voters they still care about them, and on the other, keep their new recruits in the red wall sweet. A hard task when the two voting blocs historically come from opposite ends of the political spectrum. But the two by-elections tomorrow, also at opposite ends of the country, symbolise what had to happen for Boris to get that whopping 80-seat landslide. And it might indicate whether or not he can keep it. Two Tory headaches in the middle of a national economic storm. Well, in the last hour, we were in Tiverton and Honiton to find out what voters in the traditional Tory seat in Devon were thinking. And now we can go to Wakefield, a seat held by Labour since 1932, until the Conservatives managed to nab it 3 years ago as part of their Red Wall assault.
Welcome to Wakefield. This town that had been held by the Labour Party for decades was won by the Conservatives in 2019, a definitive seat in the Red Wall. The Tory candidate was Ahmed Khan. He won by just over 3,000 votes. But just a couple of months ago, he resigned in disgrace, having been convicted for sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy. I've been speaking to some of the big players in this by-election today. First up, it was the Tory candidate, Nadeem Ahmed.
The message I'm going is my own character. I'm 16 years, a local councillor here, non-stop, so I've been here. I am from the area, I've grown up here. I know many people and hopefully meeting many more people. I'm standing on my own credibility and my own character as an educator for 20 years. People will on the doorstep say, look, you know what, Nadeem, you're not the person previously. There's people that know me, that went to school with me, and they're giving endorsements saying, look, I know this person. I've worked with him for 20 years. I worked with him 15 years. I worked with him in Morrison's or wherever they've done. So I'm getting that credibility and it's coming across, and I'm just trying to get out to as many people as we can in the shortest amount of time.
I also caught up with the leader of the Lib Dem group on the local council.
We had a visit from Daisy Cooper, the deputy leader of the Liberal Democrats, and we've seen the sort of same favours and people from across the UK come through to help out.
What would be a good result for the Liberal Democrats here on Thursday? What is your aim?
I think our aim really is to make sure that within Wakefield that we are seen as a credible, serious party that is, capable of competing.
Now, we had hoped to speak to the Labour candidate here, Simon Lightwood. I'm standing outside his campaign headquarters here, adorned with union flags and Labour posters. Sadly, though, we're told by the local Labour Party here that Simon has COVID. They won't tell us exactly when he contracted the disease, but it means that he can't speak to us in person. Simon Lightwood, front and centre there. It's interesting, on his literature, there's Lisa Nandy, the Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, there's Louise Hay. There's lots of figures in the Labour Party, but no Sir Keir Starmer. Now, the Labour Party tell us that they're running a positive campaign, and the leaflets that they've provided here do seem pretty positive, but they're not the only leaflets that have been sent by the party. This leaflet appeared at the start of the campaign, attacking the Conservative Party, of course, for their previous candidate, Imran Ahmed Khan, a convicted sex offender, and asking the question, who will the Tories choose next? So lots of apathy, really, at this by-election. The turnout is not expected to be particularly high. Of course, there are 15 candidates standing on Thursday. Reporting from the Wakefield constituency, I've been Tom Harwood for GB News.
Well, it's time for me to put my flat cap on and my best nasal racing commentator voice, because here are the other runners and riders. There are 15 candidates standing in Wakefield. They are Sir Archibald Stanton, Earl Eaton from the official Monster Raving Loony Party, Nadeem Ahmed for the Conservatives, Akef Akbar, who's independent, Paul Bickerdike from the Christian People's Alliance, Mick Dodgson of the Freedom Alliance, Jada Franson, an independent, Jordan Gaskell for the UK Independence Party, David Hurdson of the Yorkshire Party, Therese Hurst from the English Democrats, Christopher Jones, Northern Independence Party, Simon Lightwood for Labour, Jamie Needle for the Liberal Democrats, Ash Routh of the Green Party, Ashley Simon from Britain First, and Chris Walsh from Reform UK. Let's talk to Tom now. There are two by-elections going on tomorrow. So are there common battlegrounds for both? Tom?
Yes, it's interesting looking at the context in which both of these by-elections appeared in two almost similar ways, although we don't want to equate the level of offences of those two members who resigned. In Wakefield, of course, Imran Ahmed Khan resigned in disgrace, a convicted sex offender, having been convicted of sexual assault against a 15-year-old boy. Well, as down in Tiverton, of course, the resignation came about through two incidents of watching pornography in the House of Commons. So two sexual offences, I suppose, although I think it is probably fair to draw a clear distinction between one who was a convicted criminal and one who was not. However, yes, it does seem that sleaze and scandal dominates the local factors in these by-elections, and I'd be lying to tell you that that wasn't coming up with the people that I spoke to in Wakefield this week. Clearly, people think that the local factors in these by-elections are important. But on the other hand, of course, this comes at a peculiar time in our national story, where we're in the middle of a week of industrial action, the like of which we have not seen on national railways for a very long time. We're seeing sky-high inflation inching towards the double digits. Of course, 9.1% inflation announced just this morning. And of course, we're seeing the government taking on battlegrounds when it comes to migration and other issues. So really, it seems like there's big national politics at play, but it would be really remiss to dismiss those local issues in these seats as well.
Tom Harwood, our political correspondent, live from Westminster. I'm beginning to think we've got a production line of Tom Harwood clones scattered around the country. Now, 2 hours of presenting is pretty thirsty work without a brew. So, as Boris bounces into Rwanda for the Commonwealth Annual Summit, I want to raise a GB News branded mug to one of the greatest imports from our global mates. Tea. You probably thought it comes from India, didn't you? And while they do grow the most in the world, they drink it themselves. And it's Kenya we have to thank for 90% of the tea we drink. But did you also know the EU, run by the cynical business interests of Nestle, Unilever and chums, make it hellishly difficult for tea makers in Kenya to do anything other than pick the leaves and hand them tariff-free to massive multinationals? Well, let's hope Brexit leads the way and sees Commonwealth countries able to produce, package and post their amazing produce directly here, lowering the costs for us and creating jobs and money for them. After all, Brussels gave grants to most of our tea factories to move them to Eastern Europe. Cheers. Hold on, here we go. Here's to my agenda. Well, it used to be a Rolex or a Lamborghini, but the must-have trendy tag in 2022 is being trans. Historian Tom Holland has pointed out people can climb the social pecking order simply by claiming to be trans or non-binary or gender fluid or whatever, and that homosexuality is now considered boring. It's the latest luxury ideology in a world of identity politics, where if you aren't something that can be granted victim status, you are a nobody. In fact, you're probably a horrible human to be blamed for everything. Yet the irony is, as a result of it all, the most discriminated against people will end up being the white, straight, male middle classes. Now, talking of white, straight, male middle classes, realising that they're now seriously out of fashion, crisp-peddling, Brexit-bashing Twitter-ramoniac Gary Lineker, who clearly is in mental despair at having been out of the headlines for all of 2 seconds, has claimed to have been the victim of racist abuse when he was younger due to the darkish colour of his skin. Hang on a minute, is Gary Lineker black? Well, helpfully, it has become the most popular search term when typing his name into Google, and immediately pops up that time he appeared on the horrible BBC Family Tree for Narcissists show, Who Do You Think You Are? His heritage is about as English as they get and includes a stocking maker nicked for stealing chickens and a calligrapher who wrote legal documents. Neither of them, though, practiced their respective pastimes in Karachi or Kigali. Poor old Gary. Guess he'll just have to stay an overpaid, widely despised has-been. Well, in happy news, when I am living under a bridge in Hammersmith with a litter of feral cats because I'll never be able to buy a house in London, I won't be worried about the fact that cars still can't drive across it, as they'll be flying instead. Look at this nippy little number. There he is. The wonderfully named Jetson 1, costing a pinch at only 68,000 quid, the average stamp duty on a cheap London gaff, I hasten to add, has just completed its first ever commute from his owner's Italian home to the company building in Tuscany, a whopping 3-mile trip that took 88% less time than normal. We've been promised flying cars since Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, written, for those of you who don't know, by Ian Fleming, the man behind James Bond. And I'm all for it. Dawn.
I've just got an image of you under a bridge with a load of cats. Thank you for that, Alex. Thank you.
Well, it's probably going to be my fate. Well, with the cost of living crisis is what I'm preparing for. Thankfully, before we go on, that's all we've got time for, Dawn. I've loved your company today, as always, and thank you for the whoop of support when I finished the candidates list. Super appreciated it. Join me again for We Need to Talk About, same time, same place, 2 o'clock tomorrow. Up next, it's the wonderful Colin Brazier, and I'm going to leave you with the weather forecast now. There might be thunder coming. See you tomorrow.
Hello, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. Plenty of fine sunny weather around this evening, but the weather is on the change. Still some hot sunshine tomorrow, but an increasing chance of seeing some thunderstorms and turning more showery generally as we head into the weekend. There is a weak weather front across the far north of Scotland, but actually it's the weather coming in from the south that's going to give us a few problems over the next 48 hours or so. Initially, though, very pleasant out there this evening. Warm, hazy, a balmy summer's evening, if you like. But notice down to the south, the threat of some heavy showers across the Channel Isles, and they may well track across the Channel during the early hours. Always the risk of a bit of patchy rain across the Northern Isles and the Western Isles, but for most it's a dry night, a pretty warm night. Temperatures in many towns and cities staying in the mid-teens. Another very warm and sunny day to come for many on Thursday. A lot of clouds still across Western Scotland, light today, and Northern Ireland, but it's further south where the cloud is likely to produce some heavy showers, initially across the southeast, but becoming more widespread over England and Wales as we go through the day. Now, not everywhere is going to see these big downpours, but where they do occur, they could cause some problems. Highest temperatures during tomorrow. Northern England, North Midlands, where we could push 30 Celsius. Many other places, though, into the low to mid-20s. But we do have this Met Office yellow warning in place for those thunderstorms. As I said, hit and miss. Not everywhere will see them, but where they do occur, they could cause some disruption, large hail, gusty winds, a lot of rain falling in a short space of time. Continued likelihood of heavy showers during the course of Thursday night and into Friday. And then out west, we've got these bands of rain starting to push in, and they will bring some wet weather to Northern Ireland. Greater chance again of seeing some heavy showers breaking out during the day across parts of England, across the Midlands and the northeast of England in particular. The outlook is for the cooler and showery weather in the west to become more dominant. Temperature dropping off on Friday, dropping off further for Saturday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.